northeastern Texas is preparing for flash floods as heavy rains are moving their way into the Lone Star State. On Thursday, flash flood warnings were issued for numerous counties in northeastern Texas, including in Dallas County and parts of Tarrant County, where Fort Worth is. The warnings are in place through at least Thursday as the storm is moving through, and Governor Greg Abbott has prepared emergency response teams to be ready for any potential disaster. Meteorologists say the storms could bring 2 to 4 inches of rain across the region, with up to 7 inches in some parts. All right, a massive fire breaking out at a paper mill in Oregon. Crews say a 3-alarm fire sparked at a property formerly known as the Blue Heron Paper Mill in Oregon City this morning. The fire is now under control. No injuries reported. Fire officials have not yet released the cause of that fire. But back in December 2020, the site was set on fire by arson. The property is now owned by the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde, who released a statement saying they are disheartened by the fire and are working with authorities to assess this situation. All right, Senator Marsha Blackburn explains that many Democrat senators are likely to vote for the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act. Here's One America's John Hines.
One big issue I know coming out of the House, and it was one of the first issues introduced into the Congress, was this idea of keeping biological men out of women's sports. I think that was a huge issue in the campaign, of course. The House has already acted on that. I think there's some legislation that's due to come over to the Senate any day now. The Protection of Women or Girls in Women's Sports Act. Where is that now, Senator? And when do you anticipate a vote on that?
Yes, indeed. We have a package of bills that deal with protecting women in sports. One is to require the Attorney General to look at this issue and produce a report that would let us know about violence and lost opportunity for women in sports when they are required to compete against biological males. Another is a resolution that would encourage the NCAA, which of course we oversee here at the Senate Commerce Committee, but encourage them to remove their policy, to rescind that policy that allows biological males to compete against biological females. And the third is a resolution that would put in place October 10th every year as American Girls in Sports Day. We have 3 million high school and college girls that are competing in athletics. And we should take a day and recognize their achievements. And of course, October 10th would be 10th month, 10th day. The Roman numerals for that would be XX. So we can celebrate our women in sports.
That would be the XX chromosome, I believe. Is that the idea right there?
You've got that right.
Well, so the Protection of Women and Girls in Sports Act, this really seems like one of those 80-20 issues that people talk about, yes, especially lawmakers. And I'm wondering, I mean, there's a poll, an Ipsos poll, I think said about 80% of Americans support keeping biological men out of women's sports. Do you anticipate Democratic support for this when it comes up for a vote?
You know, I do indeed. I hope that my Democratic colleagues did learn something in the November election, and they realize, I hope they begin to realize that the American people have rejected DEI policies. They have rejected this men and women's sports. They have rejected 2 tiers of justice. They have rejected open border policies. They have rejected 20% inflation during the Biden years, and they want to see a change in how this country is run. President Donald J. Trump is delivering that every year, every day, with executive orders, and John, many times every day. And it is going to be up to Congress to codify those actions, put them into law, and make them permanent.
Senator Marsha Blackburn, it has been a pleasure to catch up with you, Senator. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for your time.
Well, it's always a pleasure to see and talk with you. Thanks so much.
And Miami Heat player Terry Rozier is being investigated for potentially participating in a gambling scheme. According to reports Thursday, prosecutors claim Rozier manipulated his performance in a 2023 season game, all part of an illegal gambling scheme. The investigation comes after Rozier reportedly left the game early with a sore foot and finished with 5 points, 4 rebounds, and 2 assists. The NBA was alerted of his suspicious betting activity related to Rozier's performance and ties to a larger gambling ring. Rozier has not been charged with a crime or accused of wrongdoing. The NBA is cooperating with this investigation. Baltimore Ravens kicker Justin Tucker is being accused of sexual misconduct by 6 massage therapists at 4 separate businesses. The NFL player immediately denied the allegations on Thursday, calling them unequivocally false in a statement on X. Accusations include claims Tucker exposed himself, made unwanted physical contact with the women, and was banned from returning to at least 2 spas. Tucker also accused journalists of deliberately misconstruing the events and not giving him enough time to respond. The NFL said they take any allegations seriously and will be looking into this matter. All right, and welcome back. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth speaking with NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte. This happened this afternoon. The 2 defense chiefs spoke over the phone on, it happened yesterday on Wednesday, to talk about their shared commitment to strengthening U.S. and allied military cooperation. Among priorities discussed were increasing allies' defense spending and expanding domestic defense production capacity. Now, the 2 reportedly agreed to meet in person very shortly.
It is completely realistic to believe that the Chinese will eventually, maybe even in the short term, try to do in Greenland what they have done at the Panama Canal and in other places.
And Secretary of State Rubio says President Trump is extremely serious about obtaining Greenland due to its importance for national security. Speaking to Megyn Kelly on Thursday, the Floridian warned the Chinese Communist Party is looking for jump points in the Arctic Ocean due to having no direct access in their territory. He said this is exactly why the president wants the U.S. to obtain Greenland.
Is if the United States is on the hook to provide, as we are now, we have a defense agreement with them to protect Greenland if it comes under assault. If we're already on the hook for having to do that, then we might as well have more control over what happens there. And so I know it's a delicate topic for Denmark, but it's, again, a national interest item for the United States.
He said they are currently still working out plans for how best strategically to pursue obtaining the world's largest island. And Israel celebrating the release of 3 hostages after nearly 500 days in Hamas captivity. Israeli soldier Agam Berger, civilian Arbel Yoyud, and 80-year-old Gadi Moses are all free today. 5 Thai hostages also released, while the hostages were planned to be exchanged for 100 detained Palestinians, including terrorists. Israeli Prime Minister Netanyahu blasted the conduct of Hamas and its allies in the exchange as shocking and delayed their release until the hostages were safely returned. President Trump's envoy for the Middle East, Steve Witkoff, was present in Tel Aviv's Hostage Square for that release. Trump reportedly hopes the ceasefire can be a springboard to repair relations between Israel and Saudi Arabia. Lucy Fielder has our report.
Chaotic scenes as Hamas handed over Israeli hostage Arbel Yehud to the Red Cross on Thursday, fearful and apparently struggling to walk as crowds surged around her. Israel delayed the release of 110 Palestinian prisoners under the Gaza ceasefire deal, but went ahead after mediators committed to ensuring the safe passage of hostages in future releases, the Prime Minister's office said. An Israeli hostage abducted by Hamas from the same kibbutz as Yehud, 80-year-old Gadi Moses, was also released, along with 5 Thai nationals who'd been working on Israeli farms when armed militants burst through the border fence on October 7, 2023. And Israeli soldier Agam Berger, who was first led between ruined buildings and over piles of rubble in Jabalia in northern Gaza. Thursday's releases saw another show of force for Hamas, a reminder that it still has a strong presence in Gaza after more than 15 months of heavy bombardment from the Middle East's most advanced military. Yehud was handed over on the site of the bombed house of Hamas leader Yahya Sinwar, who was killed by Israel. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu threatened death to anyone hurting hostages and urged mediators to ensure the jostling crowd scenes wouldn't be repeated. Later on Thursday, buses arrived in the West Bank city of Ramallah carrying some of the Palestinian prisoners, expected to be freed as part of the phased agreement. In Israel, it was a day of celebration in what has become known as Hostages Square in Tel Aviv, where people were watching on giant screens. Some cheered when US Middle East envoy Steve Witkoff joined them, in apparent gratitude for his role in securing the ceasefire deal. More than 250 hostages were abducted in the Hamas attack in Israel, and more than 1,200 people were killed, according to Israeli tallies.
It's very simple. If Donald Trump taxes Brazilian products, there will be reciprocity from Brazil in taxing products that are exported to the United States.
And that is Brazilian President Lula da Silva saying his government would reciprocate in the event President Trump decides to impose tariffs on that country. President Lula making those comments at a press conference on Thursday. Lula, who is currently in his third term, said he would rather improve relations and boost trade ties with the U.S., calling for mutual respect.
Trump was elected to govern the United States, and I sent him a letter hoping he has a good governance for the country. And I was elected to govern Brazil. I want to respect the United States, and I want Trump to respect Brazil.
And Lula also said that he wants to export more, import more if necessary, and maintain the 200-year relationship between Brazil and America. All right, straight ahead on One America News, the U.S. Navy, the destroyer USS Fitzgerald, with a new AI program intended to help crew members identify technical issues before they happen. That's according to a report from the War Zone on Wednesday. The new program, called Enterprise Remote Monitoring Version 4, can analyze 10,000 sensors per second across the ship to monitor for wear or damage. This experimental program is just one part of the Pentagon's condition based on Maintenance Plus program, and is the first time the program has been installed on a U.S. Navy ship. All right, Elise Stefanik's nomination for UN Ambassador advancing. Stefanik's nomination passed through the Senate on Foreign Relations Committee with bipartisan support Thursday. The New York representative says she's honored for the bipartisan vote and will continue to work through the Senate confirmation process to bring President Trump's America First peace through strength and leadership to the UN. Senate Republicans congratulated Stefanik, saying America will be well served by her leadership at the UN. Experts predict Stefanik will likely be confirmed by the Senate sometime next week. All right, Howard Lutnick facing questioning before the Senate Committee on Commerce. Here's One America's Taylor Tinsley.
Will you commit to working closely with myself, other members of this committee, on solutions that will expand commercial sector access to this key spectrum while at the same time protecting U.S. national security interests?
You got to ask me a tougher question than that. Absolutely, yes.
Senate lawmakers grill President Trump's nominee to lead the Department of Commerce. Howard Lutnick faced questions during a confirmation hearing Wednesday. Lutnick was introduced by Vice President J.D. Vance ahead of the questioning, saying he's never met someone in the private sector more aware of the fact that what happens in the real economy affects real people.
This is a person who on the world stage will say more and do more and convince businesses that America is back, that America is growing and thriving. And I think that will inure to the benefit, most importantly, of American workers who have seen their wages stagnate, their real living standards decline. And Howard is exactly the kind of guy that we need to reverse that trend and get American commerce back on track.
Lutnick is a billionaire Wall Street CEO who succeeded Bernard Gerald Cantor as the head of Cantor Fitzgerald, one of the world's leading financial service firms. As Commerce Department Secretary, Lutnick would be responsible for enforcing tariffs on foreign imports, negotiating trade deals, and promoting American businesses and industries. He says Canada and Mexico can avoid Trump's threat to impose a 25% tariff on U.S. imports if they work quickly to stop illegal immigrants and fentanyl crossing into the states, which has killed over 100,000 Americans.
There's no war we could have that would kill 100,000 Americans. The president is focused on ending fentanyl coming into the country. You know that the labs in Canada are run by Mexican cartels. So this tariff model is simply to shut their borders with respect America. If we are your biggest trading partner, show us the respect, shut your border, and end fentanyl coming into this country. So it is not a tariff per se, it is an action of domestic policy. Shut your border and stop allowing fentanyl into our country.
Lutnick went on to say he's advised Trump to impose tariffs country by country.
Let America make it more fair. We are treated horribly by the global trading environment. They all have higher tariffs, non-tariff trade barriers, and subsidies. They treat us poorly. We need to be treated better. We need to be treated with respect, and we can use tariffs to create reciprocity, fairness, and respect.
Lutnick also defended Trump's freeze on federal aid and grants, saying if his advisors determined the move was legal, then he'll rely on Trump's decision. Taylor Tinsley, One America News.
And despite what many politicians claim today, America was founded as a republic and not as a democracy. Here's One America's Pearson Sharp.
America is unique in the history of the world. There's never been another country like us, and there probably never will be again. We've been entrusted with the greatest experiment mankind has ever seen, the American experiment. And it's ours to keep or lose. America's fate is in our hands.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. It has to be fought for and defended by each generation.
One of the biggest lies coming out of Washington today is that America is a democracy. You hear all these politicians, especially during an election year, talk about our sacred democracy, how we have to protect our democracy, how Donald Trump is threatening our democracy.
And they are uniting, they say, to protect democracy at the state level during Trump's second term in office.
We need to pass legislation to protect our democracy.
Because our democracy, in my view, our democracy is at stake.
But rarely did our predecessors face the sort of malice that now confronts our democracy from within.
Been trying to frame this election as a fight for the future of democracy.
A corporate takeover of our democracy. As critical as protecting our democracy.
If the forces who seek to dismantle our democracy, well, they often ask about the state of our democracy. The strength of democracy, the strength of democracy, the strength of democracy, and the fragility of democracy. If we do not defend it, democracy simply will not stand.
Over time, because of lies like these, most Americans have been convinced that we do, in fact, live in a democracy.
In this century, great strides have been made toward the goal of subverting our republic and transforming it into a democracy. The foremost tactic of the subverters is subversion of language. By calling America a democracy until people thoughtlessly accept and use the term, totalitarians have obscured the real meaning of American principles of government.
This is dangerous and wrong because America is not a democracy and it was never intended to be. Democracy is just a fancy word for mob rule, where 51% of the people take away the rights of the other 49%. It's like two wolves and a lamb voting on what they should have for lunch. It means whatever the majority of people want, they get. Now, that sounds good on paper until you realize the majority of people are selfish, ignorant, short-sighted, greedy, and vindictive, and mostly just downright stupid. And that's why America was always meant to be a constitutional republic, because the founding fathers were very concerned about what they called the tyranny of the majority.
A democracy is a political system in which the people periodically, by majority vote at the polls, select their rulers. The rulers then have absolute power to make whatever laws they please by a majority vote among themselves.
It's a problem with all democracies. 200 years ago, a Scottish philosopher, Lord Alexander Tytler, warned that a democracy cannot exist as a permanent form of government. It can only exist until the voters discover that they can vote themselves more money from the public treasury. After that, the majority of people will always vote for whoever promises to give them the most money, which destroys the democracy and then paves the way for dictatorship and tyranny. Thomas Jefferson said something similar. Democracy will cease to exist when you take away from those who are willing to work and give to those who would not. James Madison warned that democracies are turbulent and contentious. Alexander Hamilton said that real liberty is impossible in a democracy. And Samuel Adams wrote that democracy wastes, exhausts, and murders itself. We can see all of these things happening in ancient Greece, where democracies always devolved into mob rule, chaos and corruption, and then tyranny. So now we know why democracies are dangerous, but what's the difference between a democracy and a republic, what our country is supposed to be? Well, like we just saw, democracy means the people are ruled by the mob. No laws, but the will of the majority of the people. But in a republic, what we have in America, the government is based around the rule of law, which means our rights are protected from both the government and from the mob's popular opinion.
In a constitutional republic, the people also, by majority vote at the polls, select rulers, who make laws by majority vote among themselves. But the rulers cannot make any laws they please because the Constitution severely restricts their lawmaking power.
It's an important distinction. The trouble is, today, that not only do most Americans not understand the difference between a republic and a democracy, they don't even understand the difference between a Republican and a Democrat, which is crucial if you want to understand how our country is supposed to work. Most people believe that parties like Democrats and Republicans are on a spectrum, where the far left equals communism and the far right equals fascism. But that's completely backwards, and the people who say that can never explain what they mean. In reality, that spectrum should measure government power from 100% total government control on the far left to 0% no government control at all on the far right. So on the left, you'd have things like communism, socialism, fascism, and yes, even Nazis. On the right, you'd have complete anarchy. The left hates this fact, but fascists and Nazis were socialists. Their form of government involved complete and total government control. In other words, fascism is another form of big government, exactly the opposite of what Republicans want. Conservatives, as a party, fight for less government, not more, and so there is no reality in which a conservative would be a fascist. It's a contradiction in terms. Even Wikipedia gets this completely wrong and says fascism is a far-right ideology characterized by a dictatorial leader. That's impossible because people on the far right don't want dictators. That's the ultimate form of big government, which us on the right hate. Democrats, on the other hand, are the epitome of big government. They can't get enough of it. Every single policy they pass gives the government more power and takes away rights from you and me. That is the hallmark of authoritarianism, of totalitarianism, of fascism. Government involvement in every aspect of your life. True freedom is in the middle of the spectrum, where the government has proper checks and balances and only has the power it needs to protect our rights as citizens. That's right where the U.S. Constitution places America. In America, which is a republic, laws are the governing force, not the will of the mob. If 51% of the people want to take away your home, they can't just take it. they still have to follow the law. Do you see why that matters? Why that's so important? If you're not convinced yet, try this. Did you know that the word democracy never appears once, not one time, in the Declaration of Independence, or in the U.S. Constitution, or in the Bill of Rights? They never once mention a democracy. But you know what the Constitution does mention? A republic. Specifically, in Article 4, Section 4 of the U.S. Constitution, it states, "The United States shall guarantee to every state in this union a republican form of government." That should make it perfectly clear that our founding fathers did everything they could to not just give us a republic, but a constitutional republic. What that means is that we as a majority elect our leaders, who are then restricted by our Constitution as to what laws they can pass. That's the blessing of America. We have an amazing Constitution that protects we the people from both the tyranny of the mob and the tyranny of the elite.
Very old and very wise, Franklin saw through the mists of time to the day when Americans might trade their freedom in a constitutional republic for the promise of government guaranteed equality and security in a democracy. And beyond that, to the day when democracy inevitably degenerates into dictatorship, guaranteeing nothing but poverty and serfdom for the people it robs and rules. The American constitutional system, unique in history, enabled Americans to develop a backward continent into the most magnificent nation of all time.
Nowhere else in the world has such a constitution, and nowhere else in the world has the kinds of freedoms and individual liberty we have here in America. We weren't given a democracy. We were given a republic. Now the question is, can we keep it? For One America News, I'm Pearson Sharp.
Base is looking to take full advantage of President Trump's renewed support of cryptocurrencies. The exchange announced 2 new additions to its Global Advisory Council Wednesday. Former Senator Kyrsten Sinema and Trump's 2024 campaign advisor Chris Lacavita. Sinema said that she wants to use her knowledge of the lawmaking process to get legislation passed and signed by Trump. And Lacavita said Trump has learned a lot from his youngest son, Barron, and says the president wants to be at the forefront of technology. All right, the stock market ending higher with upbeat comments from Tesla, helping to offset a disappointing forecast from Microsoft. Lisa Bernard has our report.
U.S. stocks ended higher on Thursday as investors digested a stack of key earnings reports, including from mega-cap tech companies. The Dow gained almost 0.4%, the S&P 500 added more than 0.5%, and the Nasdaq climbed 0.25%. Shares of Apple ended lower and dropped further in extended trading after the tech giant reported weaker iPhone sales and revenue from China during the holiday quarter. Intel, up more than 1% at the close, rose further in extended trading after its fourth quarter revenue topped expectations. Tesla shares ended higher after CEO Elon Musk vowed to launch long-awaited cheaper EVs in the first half of 2025 and start testing an autonomous ride-hailing service in June. His comments overshadowed quarterly results that fell short of expectations. Meanwhile, shares of Microsoft plummeted more than 6% after forecasting disappointing growth in its cloud computing business. The CEOs of both Microsoft and Meta Platforms defended their heavy investments in artificial intelligence days after a new AI model from Chinese startup DeepSeek rattled Wall Street and triggered a sell-off in AI-related stocks. But Shana Orsic-Sizzle, founder and CEO of Bonrian Capital Management, sees the recent pullback as a buying opportunity.
I still think NVIDIA wins. I still think Vertiv wins. I still think Marvel wins. And now they're 30% cheaper. So why wouldn't I be buying those stocks right now? I I would totally load up on a lot of these names, because at the end of the day, the long-term thesis, the long-term trends are supportive of these companies. And now we're just getting them at much better valuations.
Research from market tracking firm Vanda showed that retail investors poured $1 out of every $3 of their investments into NVIDIA shares after the AI chip maker suffered its record one-day drop earlier this week.
An e-cigarette company, Juul, wins an order banning U.S. imports of vaping devices from tobacco company Altria. On Wednesday, a U.S. trade tribunal sided with Juul in order to ban on imports of Altria's Enjoy vaping devices and cartridges, at least some of which are being made overseas in China and Malaysia. The order comes amid a patent dispute over e-cig technology. The U.S. International Trade Commission found the Enjoy devices violated Juul's patent rights for their vaporizer innovations. The ban will take effect in 60 days unless overturned by the Office of U.S. Trade Representative under the new Trump administration. All right, researchers are studying how a sense of smell could make gaming better for players. Olivia Zellino has our report.
It smells like a car crash, like burning tires.
PhD student Danelle Zhozhanova isn't in a vehicle. She's playing a video game. The smell she's describing is coming from a scent tube on the gaming headset she's wearing. It's a prototype for a novel experiment at the intersection of gaming and sensory science, looking at the use of olfactory stimuli in a virtual racing scenario, and whether it could give users a boost. Professor Alan Chalmers at the University of Warwick, which is celebrating its 60th anniversary, is leading the research.
Gaming, of course, people want a more immersive gaming experience, and of course smell is a very important part of the real world. So in the driving simulation that we're doing here, if you have the smell of the burning brakes, of course it's going to indicate there's a problem and you should maybe take your foot of the brake. So if you didn't have that smell of burning in the game, you wouldn't respond correctly.
The headset was designed to release specific odors such as machine oil and burning rubber at critical moments in the game. But Chalmers acknowledges those aren't exactly winning smells inside your home.
Smell-o-vision and scratch and sniff have been around for a long time, but the big problem with any smell is if you puff smell into an environment, how do you get rid of it? So really the research element is trying to deliver just the right amount of smell that you have the immersive experience without completely smothering the whole environment in it.
The project is a collaboration with video game developers Hollywood Gaming. They're aiming to create the next big thing in gaming, though the research has applications beyond the game console.
Samples and just try one.
Chalmers and his team have also developed a prototype device that tests people's sense of taste. He says it could be used as an early screening tool for Alzheimer's disease by measuring how someone's sense of smell and taste changes over time in, say, a cooking game.
We can check how good you are compared to your age or sexual ethnicity or compared to yourself 6 months ago. If you're not where you should be, then you could have a problem and you should be looked at further.
All right, thank you. Good. Teamwork. Yep.
All right, 2 astronauts stuck on the ISS get their first opportunity to leave the capsule in nearly 8 months. Earlier today, American astronauts Suni Williams and Butch Wilmore donned the heavy spacesuits to do a spacewalk to perform maintenance and swab the side of the ship to see if microbes have survived the harshness of space. The 2 astronauts were originally sent to the ISS in June to do a week-long mission, but major malfunctions with the new Boeing Starliner capsule prevented their return, extending their stay for many months. The pair are not expected to be able to return until March or April, when Elon Musk's SpaceX can send a rocket to the ISS to bring them back home.